In September 2019, we released our Jurassic World Evolution Year in Review video that analysed and assessed the Jurassic World Evolution game after a year since its launch, including all of its concurrent DLCs. Today, we cover the newest, perhaps largest and most ambitious DLC to date, Return to Jurassic Park. As such, this video is a sequel to that review a few months back, so I encourage viewers to watch that video first for some context. Likewise, we will review the DLC and assess its merits, its disappointing features, how it adds to the overall base game, and rate it based on its current retail price. This is the review for Jurassic World Evolution Return to Jurassic Park. The most engaging and fruitful introduction of this DLC brings players back into time to the original 1993 Isla Nublar Jurassic Park with the original fully voiced cast, the original faithfully reconstructed park with all the original dinosaurs. The opening 2-minute intro and cutscene features the iconic InGen helicopter, and it immediately drenches players into absolute nostalgia and paints a very clear emotional direction of the DLC. Guided by a reasonably passable reenactment of Hammond's voice with his sidekick, a young Cabot Finch, players are introduced into what seems like an alternate canon timeline, where the original cast actually returns to the Nublar Island after the events of the first movie. For the next 4 or so hours, the overarching focus is on the player to restore the island to working order, interact with the existing dinosaurs, and introduce new ones, before, you guessed it, opening the park again, this time to the general public, which in the first movie had failed to reach this stage. So this campaign storyline plays more out like a what-if scenario. Instead of waiting 22 years to finally launch a Jurassic World, the idea of the base game, this alternate history allows players to relive a thriving Jurassic Park. It's a lot of hubristic display with all the "we'll do it right this time" statements, and it's a bit disconcerting to see characters such as Ian Malcolm, Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler, which one would assume to be vehemently against opening the park after their recent experiences, be so willing to bend over backwards and compromise to Hammond's rather unconvincing ideals. All in all, there are some slightly unrealistic character arcs, but I guess finding a way to justify reopening the park without being too obtrusive to the play experience is quite difficult. By mission 3, players are thrust to the companion island of Isla Sorna, or Site B, again another pivotal part of the film canon. However, this island is much more different from the base game version of Sorna. Here, players recover the facilities again that were previously destroyed to allow incubation and transportation of additional dinosaurs into the Nublar public sites. Once this is all done and dusted, however, the focus is immediately back on Nublar, and one can somewhat feel slightly disappointed with the limited interaction with Sorna, given there was a heap of InGen dirty work on this particular island, and intertwining some more references or storyline here would have been nice. After a few more dinosaur additions, by the end of the 4-hour ride, the Nublar site now resembles Hammond's dream park, filled with all the bells and whistles of the first movie, such as the raptor pen, the Dilophosaurs, and the Mother Queen Tyrannosaurus, but also makes references to the park in the novel with additions such as the Pteranodon aviary and Compsognathus enclosure. The mostly predictable storyline so far then culminates into a grand finale, when an act of sabotage opens the raptor pens and releases them into the park. You may think it's easily solvable with tranquilizers, right? Well, Dr. Grant then drops a bombshell stating that these raptors are essentially a mutant strain of Velociraptor and cannot be stopped by conventional gameplay methods. The only way to stop them is to release the Mother Queen T-Rex and let her deal with the mess, invoking the final scenes of the first movie. It's a concoction of late drama, panic and confusion that lends itself as the most memorable mission of the entire DLC, perhaps even the game. And credit where credit is due, this mission was very creative in that it allowed players to handle the problem in a completely different manner never before experienced in this game, but also alludes to that iconic final scene in what can only be described as a brilliantly executed reference. To sum up, the campaign experience for me was a flow of highs and lows, where the lows are far in between, but the highs are engaging and noteworthy, It starts off strong, absolutely drenching in nostalgia, and the new islands and buildings, the fresh scenery, and the return of the star cast promises much. The campaign then sort of plateaus in the mid-stage with some of the repetitive missions we've come to know in Jurassic World Evolution, with very weak lore justification for them. However, the final hour or so is quite possibly the most entertainment I've had in this entire game, and finishes the Return to Jurassic Park DLC campaign on a particularly memorable high note. The main concern with many purchases of this DLC is how well it would add to the base game playing experience. Upon completion of the campaign, a new Jurassic Park mode is added to Sandbox and Challenge selection, allowing you to utilize the new additions on any of the original maps, plus the two new maps, Nublar and Sauna 1993 versions. Honestly, the Sauna map is a complete abortion, so let's just skip talking about that. The new Nublar map, however, is a relatively large and flat playing surface with lots of room for creativity and is a welcome addition. The new Jurassic Park mode includes the additional new buildings and is a fairly major selling point of the entire DLC. Mind you, they can only be utilized in this mode and cannot be combined with the base vanilla Jurassic World buildings, with the exception of the Aviary. Playing in this new Jurassic Park mode is a bit of a refresher course on how to build your park. There's no more pre-existing connections with the entrance monorail. Now simply a path network has to connect with a power source and the arrival helipad, adding a bit more of a secluded island feel. This change also allows you to build your park in a more centralized manner, where you can branch out from a designated position of your choice, rather than having to branch out from the initial entrance of the vanilla mode. And thus, space management and freedom is slightly better, I feel, with this mode. However, the biggest difference is dinosaur visibility. No longer can you build on-fence attractions such as viewing vents, but must plan your enclosures around the Jurassic Tour, so there is some strategic variation. Buildings for the most part mimic the base game versions with some key differences. For instance, in this new mode, the Ranger Outpost essentially does the job of both the ACU Center and the Ranger Station, tranquilizing, transporting, and medicating the dinosaurs all at once. This new mode also eliminates the need for a transportation, but still utilizes the new restroom need introduced with the 1.12 update, which was launched alongside this DLC. Furthermore, mechanics such as expeditions and research are now combined within the Visitor Center building, which acts as a central hub of operations, further reducing the amount of buildings you need to place down. These slight changes can be encapsulated as decent quality of life improvements. It feels like the Jurassic Park mode is a major step up from the original mode in terms of gameplay, specifically the freedom of construction, not being limited by building out from the edge of the map, and more building space in general. However, there is a significant glaring issue, which can be summarized in the most hyped feature of this pack: the addition of aviaries and flying reptiles in Pteranodon. In order to add this into your own park, you simply research the building and dinosaur, plop the aviary down, hatch the pteranodons, and then proceed to observe them from a variety of preset camera angles. There's no other way to interact with these dinosaurs at all, and the fact that the animals themselves have the same repeating animations indicates this feature is meant for a purely aesthetic addition rather than a gameplay feature. The redeeming factor is that it was even attempted at all in the first place. Many fans had already given up hope on any flying reptiles, and this was seen as a nice surprise that may add possibility for expansion in the future, but I wouldn't count on it. Most of the advertised features in this pack follow a similar formula, rehashing existing gameplay elements but adding a slight hint of fan service to make them unique. For instance, the new transport ride that adds the original 1993 Jurassic Park Tour Jeep is identical gameplay-wise to the existing Gyrosphere and the Jurassic Tour truck, but it has a certain flair to it that perhaps makes it more unique and desirable compared to the other modes, with its design very indicative of the first movie and thus filled with nostalgic sentiment. Similarly, the Raptor Pen, although well modelled to enhance fan service and looks great as a scenery item, has no gameplay value whatsoever, even though it is included inside the Enclosures tab. The new sign tabs, which add a bunch of thematic film canon based signage, again offer no gameplay value, merely aesthetic, and unless you're constantly zooming in or watching your park from the tour jeep, you will struggle to notice them at all. As an end result, strategic gameplay has definitely improved as a whole with the return to Jurassic Park DLC. It seems the main theme has been to reduce needless space by eliminating buildings or combining building operations together, further exemplified by the fact many buildings in this mode have a much smaller footprint. It's probably not a wild call then to suggest that if you were to purchase this pack, this is the new mode to play going forward. And I don't imagine any need to go back to the standard format unless you want a more modernized theme or access to some of the vanilla mechanics such as greenhouses. Besides these overarching changes, however, many of the buildings only really serve as aesthetic decorations. There is little micromanagement difference as they play out virtually the same to the base game. The most attractive elements of this DLC is really a merit to how it has upped the wonderful design of an already beautiful game. The addition of the Compsognathus has once again shattered the argument that smaller dinosaurs are impossible and really adds a mouth-watering possibility to future very small dinosaur additions. Likewise, the Pteranodon, although implemented quite poorly as we explained in the last section, was still executed quite well aesthetically and represents another huge step forward in ambition for Frontier, opening up another Pandora's box of possibilities for the future. Besides that, the nostalgia value has been greatly enhanced with the addition of tons of new dinosaur skins, perhaps the most defining feature of this DLC. Skin variations from the original Jurassic Park trilogy have largely been covered and then some, designed with meticulous attention to detail and providing great nostalgic value. Some of my personal favorites include the quilled 2001 Velociraptor skin, plus the 2001 Ankylosaurus skin that was featured in Jurassic Park 3, and the 1997 green striped Tyrannosaurus skin from The Lost World. The Pteranodon, again to emphasize their great looks, feature the base Jurassic Park 3 skin, but you can also splash on the 1997 skin for a unique model and crest design referencing The Lost World. If you're a fan of the design of the animals in the movies, this will probably be the most enjoyable content of the DLC for you. The new buildings, as we discussed earlier, may be overall underwhelming from a gameplay point of view, but they impress from a presentation standpoint, particularly the iconic buildings from the first movie, such as the Visitor Center or the, albeit useless, Raptor Pen. They are designed with sentimental value in mind. The thatch straw archaic theme of many of the visitor amenity buildings are also thematically relevant to the first movie, and dare I say evocative of Operation Genesis theme, which in itself adds more to the nostalgia effect. Some of the alternative buildings I feel are also better looking than their vanilla counterparts. For instance, the geothermal power station is much more of a realistic and immersive looking building compared to its predecessor, not to mention it is valid as a lore reference. I also find the new hatchery design to be more pleasing on the eyes than the Hammond Creation Lab. This DLC is pretty abysmal customization wise, as it adds very minuscule features to enhance decorative elements. In fact, the free 1.12 update that launched alongside this adds substantially more without the upfront cost of this pack, such as redwood trees and the restroom mechanic. The park signage and light post additions are overall lackluster, and in my playing experience I didn't really feel their effect, mainly due to their extremely small size. Regardless, the aesthetic presentation is unequivocally still the major highlight of this DLC. The campaign was an overall fun, affectionate adventure back in time, possibly the best campaign of Jurassic World Evolution, including all of its DLCs. Minor mid-game repetition prevents a higher score, but creative mission design and nostalgic elements of fan service fuel the entertainment value. Replayability has slightly improved due to the new Jurassic Park mode, but a lack of meaningful new gameplay features, especially with the Avery mechanic, makes this rating mostly mediocre. 2 new well-designed dinosaurs, new articulately crafted building models, combined with a wide variety of film canon skins, forms the crux of this pack's offerings. Customization has barely improved, however. Overall, I give this DLC an 8 out of 10. The current price of Return to Jurassic Park DLC is $20 US, which in my opinion is quite steep. Ultimately, it's a real letdown since I believe the overmarked pricing will prevent this pack from being considered an insta-purchase. Because most of the enjoyment factor comes through in the roughly 4-hour campaign, players have to judge whether the future replayability offered by this pack is worth it. I think if you are a huge fan of the series in general and are already enjoying the game, then it's a borderline must buy regardless, but a more sensible recommendation would be to wait for a sale, and those haven't been lacking for Frontier games in recent history. Frontier Studios has delivered what some may say their final last outing for Jurassic World Evolution, undoubtedly exploiting the fan base's nostalgia and have tapped into some strong desires for a Jurassic Park rendition into their game. But that is not necessarily a bad thing, to be fair. The entire campaign plays itself like a homage to that iconic first film. The references, the inclusion of most of the original cast, all the way down to the new buildings rendered in spirit of the first movie, all tug at the player's emotional memory. Perhaps I'm influenced by recency bias or some rose-tinted love for the original trilogy, but this was still by far the most entertaining campaign I've ever played in Jurassic World Evolution. The long-term gameplay feels a lot to be desired, especially since many of the buildings are just newer models that perform similar functions. The most hyped edition, the Avery, ended up disappointing in more ways than it entertained, and scenery items overall are forgettable. Still though, the addition of the Jurassic Park theme for Sandbox and Challenge mode is a significant boost to gameplay variation, and I imagine players will continue in this theme for the foreseeable future, adding a lot of replay value. The cream of the crop has to be the addition of the reimagined film skins, that perhaps for a long time coming was a massive request in the community. Not only have they been faithfully redesigned, but the staggering amount included may justify the steep price of the pack. Return to Jurassic Park is conclusively the best major DLC of Jurassic World Evolution, and one that perhaps resonates most affectionately with the fanbase. But whether or not you're willing to shell out for overpriced nostalgia, well, the choice is yours.